Lying about your rank is a federal offense, sweetheart. So why don't you stop wasting my time and tell the truth before I make this official? The words cut through the Joint Operations briefing room like a blade scraping across the hull of a warship. Slow, deliberate, meant to leave a mark that everyone present would remember. Captain Raymond Holt stood at the head of the briefing table, with his arms crossed like he owned not just this base, but the entire Pacific Fleet. His jaw was set at the particular angle of a man who had never been told he was wrong by anyone whose opinion he respected. 47 people occupied the room, 12 intelligence analysts seated at classified workstations along the eastern wall. 9 Marine officers clustered near the primary tactical display. A maintenance detail of 6 frozen mid-task near the overhead ventilation panel, and 20 others filling the narrow aisles between encrypted terminals. The overhead fluorescence hummed at a frequency that lived just beneath conscious hearing. The air conditioning pushed recycled air that smelled faintly of gun oil and burnt coffee. Every one of those 47 people was watching. Holt's service dress was a walking monument to himself. Bronze Star. Navy Commendation Medal with Combat Distinguishing Device. Meritorious Service Ribbon positioned 1 millimeter higher than regulation, as if even his decorations were trying to outrank someone. His boots were polished to a mirror finish that caught the fluorescent light every time he shifted his weight. He stepped closer to the workstation. His shadow fell across her keyboard like a curtain dropping over a stage. The woman at the terminal did not look up. She was 31 years old, regulation bun pulled tight enough to smooth every stray hair into invisibility. No rank insignia anywhere on her plain utility uniform, no unit patch, no warfare pin, no name tape beyond a standard issue badge that read Technical Analyst, Temporary Assignment, and nothing else. She sat with the specific stillness of a person who had been trained to disappear in plain sight. Shoulders level, spine aligned to a vertical that most officers lost within a year of leaving Ox. Her hands rested on the keyboard at a spacing that suggested familiarity with equipment most people in this room would never see, let alone operate. Her fingers continued moving across the keys, precise, mechanical. The kind of keystrokes that came from muscle memory built somewhere no training manual in existence could replicate. I asked you a question. Holt's voice dropped lower. Theatrical. The kind of tone that expected a flinch, an apology, an admission, something he could use. She controlled her breathing. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out, hold 4. The rhythm was invisible to everyone but someone who had been trained to recognize it. My file is accurate, sir. 4 words. Calm, no anger, no explanation. Then she returned to her screen. Near the back wall of the briefing room, leaning against the doorframe of the secondary corridor with a clipboard he had stopped writing on, Master Chief Arthur Briggs watched through narrowed eyes, 62 years old. 34 years of continuous naval service. 3 combat deployments, Fallujah, Helmand Province, and a third that didn't appear on any official record. He had trained more special warfare candidates than most admirals had shaken hands with. He had seen what real operators looked like when they were pretending to be something smaller than they were. His pen stopped moving. Something about the way she held her hands over the keyboard. The angle of her wrists, slightly elevated, fingers spread with the index and middle, forming a gap of exactly 2 centimeters. The specific grip of someone who had spent thousands of hours on tactical communications equipment. Briggs had seen that particular hand position exactly twice in his career, and both times it had been at a facility in Virginia Beach that didn't appear on any map he'd ever been shown. He said nothing. His jaw tightened. He folded his arms and leaned deeper into the doorframe. He watched. Technical Analyst. Holt read her badge aloud to the room, turning the words into a performance. The kind of laugh that invites everyone else to join in. He looked over his shoulder at the 9 Marines by the display wall. They're sending us technical analysts now. What's next? The cafeteria staff running threat assessments? Maybe the laundry detail can handle our next tactical briefing. 12 people laughed. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. The sound bounced off the concrete walls and the reinforced glass of the war room partition and settled into the silence that followed like gravel at the bottom of a well. She did not blink. She did not move. She continued typing. Holt stared at her for 4 more seconds, waiting for a reaction he was never going to get. Then he straightened his shoulders, adjusted his ribbons, a nervous habit nobody had ever told him about, and walked toward the corridor. His boots struck the tile with the measured cadence of a man performing authority. The afternoon brought new indignities. By 1400, the story had already traveled through 3 group chats: the enlisted mess hall and the maintenance bay. The technical analyst who had walked into a joint operations briefing room and listed her security clearance as level 6. Captain Holt had personally verified. Level 6 clearances were reserved for JSOC Tier 1 operators, Senior Intelligence Directorate personnel, and a classification tier so restricted that most career officers had never encountered it in 30 years of service. Not for temporary technical analysts reassigned from a logistics support hub in Virginia. The story grew with each retelling, the way stories do when they serve the teller's need to belong. By 1530, someone in the communications office had added that she'd claimed familiarity with Project Meridian, a classified signals intelligence operation that had been shuttered in 2019 under circumstances nobody in this building had the clearance to discuss. By 1600, a corporal in the maintenance bay told 3 mechanics she'd attempted to access a restricted terminal using an authentication sequence that didn't match any known DoD protocol. By 1645, a lieutenant in the officers' mess described her with a word he would not have used if anyone senior had been listening. None of this was true. All of it. Spread. She sat in the enlisted mess hall at 1715, eating pasta that tasted like institutional efficiency served under fluorescent lights that made everything the color of old paperwork. Alone, the nearest occupied table was 12 feet away. That was not an accident. It was a quarantine no one had officially declared, but everyone enforced. She ate slowly. She listened. She cataloged every voice within earshot, every deference pattern, every microsecond shift in body language when certain names were mentioned. 2 lieutenants at the table nearest the exit deferred to a staff sergeant when discussing supply requisition timelines, which meant the supply chain had an informal gatekeeper that the official hierarchy didn't reflect. A chief petty officer at the corner table changed the subject 3 times when anyone mentioned the Eastern Perimeter sensor grid. 3 times, with increasing discomfort each time. Someone was hiding something. She filed the pattern. She was doing intelligence work while appearing to be an isolated target eating bad pasta. Her sleeve rode up as she reached for her coffee. The scar on her inner forearm was visible for exactly 1 second before she adjusted the fabric. Not surgical. Not clean. The jagged, irregular kind that comes from shrapnel. From being too close when an eye detonates and not having enough time to turn away. The kind of scar that medics recognize on sight and never ask about. Master Chief Briggs, seated 3 tables back with a tray he wasn't eating from, saw it. His coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down without drinking. His eyes narrowed further. The picture he was building in his mind added another piece, and the shape it was forming was beginning to look very specific. By 0600 the next morning, Captain Holt had escalated from informal mockery to formal action. I've initiated a formal credential verification through Ennis channels. He stood in the operations corridor, speaking loudly enough that the 11 personnel walking past could hear every word. Performance. Always performance. When someone walks onto my installation with paperwork that doesn't add up, I don't file a quiet complaint and wait for bureaucrats. I investigate. He was holding her personnel file. The physical copy. The hard folder with the manila cover and the classification stamp that read confidential. Personnel. He had requisitioned it from the administrative office at 0430, before the day shift, using his authority as installation operations officer. That file was the reason he was smiling. There are gaps, he said to Lieutenant Commander Price, his executive officer, who stood beside him holding her own coffee with both hands as if it were a shield. 18 months between her assignment at Norfolk and her transfer to this installation. No duty station listed. No unit designation. No commanding officer named. No evaluation reports. Nothing. Price looked uncomfortable. The kind of uncomfortable that comes from watching your superior officer build a case he hasn't fully considered. Sir, some personnel files have redacted sections for operational security, for classified operations. Holt's laugh was short and sharp, like a blade across skin. A technical analyst with classified gaps in her record? Price, I've been in the Navy for 22 years. Technical analysts don't have operational redactions. Operators do. And she is not an operator. She is a liar who padded her file, talked her way past a transfer desk, and thought nobody here would bother to check. He folded the file under his arm and walked toward the briefing room with the particular stride of a man who believed he was about to be proven right in front of everyone who mattered. She was already there. Same workstation, same posture. Same stillness. Her fingers rested on the keys, but she was not typing. She was waiting. Stand up. She stood. Slowly, not with defiance. Not with submission. With the mechanical precision of someone who had stood at attention so many thousands of times, the motion lived in her spine and did not require thought. Your credentials are under formal review as of 0545 this morning. Your base access is suspended pending verification. You will surrender your identification badge and remain in designated quarters until further notice. Do you understand? She controlled her breathing. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out, hold 4. The rhythm steadied something behind her eyes that only someone watching very closely would have seen flicker. Understood, sir. That's all you have to say? That's all that's required, sir. Holt stepped closer. His shadow fell across her face. He lowered his voice, not for privacy, but for menace. The kind of menace that works only when it has an audience. I know what you are. You're someone who inflated her file, memorized enough jargon to sound credible for 72 hours, and assumed that nobody at a real operational installation would look twice at a temporary analyst. I've seen it before. Pretenders who think the uniform is a costume. He paused. Let the silence do its work. But I check. 39 people heard every word. Not one of them spoke. The AC hummed. A terminal fan whirred. Someone in the back row shifted their weight, and a chair wheel scraped concrete with a sound that seemed much louder than it should have been. She unclipped her ID badge and placed it on the workstation. Her fingers touched its edge for exactly 1 second, index finger tracing the laminated border, as if memorizing its dimensions, as if filing it under things she would remember long after this room had forgotten her. Then she turned and walked toward the corridor. Master Chief Briggs was standing in the corridor. Still, arms folded. Clipboard gone. She passed within 3 feet of him. Their eyes met for less than a second. He saw something in her expression that most people in this building would not have recognized. Not anger, not fear, not humiliation. Recognition, the kind that said, "I know you see it, and I know you won't say anything yet." He didn't. She walked down the corridor toward the holding quarters. Her bootsteps were evenly spaced, measured, the cadence of someone counting paces out of habit, because in certain buildings, in certain countries, knowing the exact distance between rooms was the difference between extraction and capture. The holding quarters measured 8 feet by 12. Concrete walls painted the color of something that had given up trying to be white a long time ago. A metal bench bolted to the floor. A single overhead light encased in a wire cage. A window near the ceiling that showed only sky. A rectangle of Hawaiian blue so vivid it looked artificial, completely indifferent to everything happening beneath it. The door locked from the outside. The sound of the bolt engaging was a flat, industrial thud. She sat on the bench, hands on her knees, back straight. The position of someone who had waited in smaller rooms than this one, and for far longer, and in places where the people on the other side of the door were not fellow service members. She controlled her breathing. 4 in, hold 4, 4 out, hold 4. The rhythm was the only sound in the room besides the hum of a ventilation duct that smelled of disinfectant failing to cover something older. This is the near-fail moment. The point where anyone watching from the outside would think she's finished. Detained, credentials confiscated. Personnel file under formal investigation by a captain who has already written the verdict in his head. Her cover story in pieces across 3 mess halls and a dozen group chats. Game over. Except games have rules. And she was about to show every person on this installation that they had been playing the wrong game entirely. Her watch read 0847. In 23 minutes, the automated check-in protocol she had established through JSOC channels before setting foot on this base would register a missed response. A missed response from an operator at her classification level triggered an automatic escalation. Not a phone call, not an email. A flash priority alert to United States Special Operations Command. In 61 minutes, the secondary verification signal she had embedded in the facility's own communications infrastructure, planted during the first 11 minutes of her first session at that workstation, hidden inside a routine diagnostic she'd run while Captain Holt was still rehearsing his insults, would ping a server at the Pentagon that Captain Raymond Holt did not know existed. In approximately 2 hours, Captain Holt was going to learn the difference between a captain's authority over his base and a classification level that required congressional oversight to even acknowledge. Nobody had taken her watch. Nobody had even thought to. That was how she had planned this operation 3 months ago. Hit that share button so everyone sees what real justice looks like when it finally arrives. The first crack appeared at 0903. Master Chief Briggs found Lieutenant Commander Price in the operations corridor, standing near the water fountain, still holding her coffee. He spoke quietly, the kind of quiet that makes people stop what they're doing and lean in. "I'd be very careful about the woman in holding." Price frowned. "Briggs, Captain Holt has already filed the formal. I know exactly what Holt filed." Briggs didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. 34 years of service had given him the ability to make a whisper feel heavier than a shout. "I'm telling you to be careful. I've seen hands like hers exactly twice in my career, both times at a facility that doesn't appear on any map I've ever been shown. That woman is not what he thinks she is. Not even close." Price opened her mouth to respond. She didn't get the chance. The front gate called at 0911. 3 vehicles had arrived at the main checkpoint. Not standard transport. not scheduled. Command vehicles. Black Suburbans with government plates and tinted windows so dark the gate sentries couldn't verify passenger count through the glass. The lead driver presented credentials that the gate sergeant had to read twice before stepping back and waving them through without another word. By 0914, the vehicles were inside the perimeter, moving at the precise speed of people who do not hurry, because hurrying would imply that the situation was not already under their control. By 0918, 4 figures were walking across the operations courtyard in formation. The kind of appearance that says this is official business at the highest level. 2 wore service dress with stars on their shoulders that glinted in the Hawaiian morning sun. 1 carried a titanium briefcase with a biometric lock that required both thumbprint and retinal scan to open. The 4th wore a civilian suit so clean and precisely tailored it looked like it had been pressed during the drive from the airfield. Captain Holt saw them from the briefing room window. He was mid-sentence, telling a junior officer about the verification timeline, when his voice stopped. His face cycled through confusion, irritation, and something else. Something that flickered across his expression for just a heartbeat, fear, before he buried it under 22 years of practiced composure. Who authorized a flag officer visit to my facility? Nobody answered. Nobody in the room knew. Rear Admiral Catherine Chen entered the briefing room first. 2 stars. Director of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, Western Pacific Division. Her uniform was immaculate. Her expression was not angry. It was worse than angry. It was procedural. Behind her, Brigadier General Marcus Cole. Joint Special Operations Command. The man whose signature appeared on deployment orders that most of the Joint Chiefs never saw. Behind him, a Pentagon liaison whose name would not appear in any record of this visit, whose suit cost more than most officers' monthly pay, and whose presence in this room meant that whatever was about to happen had been authorized at a level that made Admiral and General look like middle management. Behind all of them, 2 federal agents with holstered sidearms, and the particular posture of people who had stopped caring about making others comfortable a very long time ago. Holt straightened, adjusted his ribbons again. The nervous habit. Admiral, General, I wasn't informed of. You weren't meant to be informed, Captain. Admiral Chen's voice was the temperature of January steel. She did not look at him as she spoke. She looked at the briefing room. She was assessing it. Counting exits. Counting personnel. The habits of someone whose career had included rooms far more dangerous than this one. Where is she? Something behind Holt's eyes shifted. A flicker of uncertainty he couldn't suppress. His blood ran cold. Where is who, ma'am? The woman you detained at 0700 this morning. The woman whose credentials you confiscated. The woman whose personnel file you pulled from the admin office at 4:30 this morning, using authority you technically possess, but profoundly should not have exercised. Chen placed her briefcase on the table and pressed her thumb to the biometric pad. The lock clicked with a sound like a round being chambered. Where is Commander Elise Marchetti? The name landed like a detonation in a closed room. 31 people were present. 9 of them recognized the name. Their reactions were immediate and involuntary. A sharp inhale from a senior intelligence analyst who went rigid at his terminal. A tablet dropping from nerveless fingers and clattering against the deck, plating like a gunshot in the stunned silence. A master-at-arms taking 1 full step backward as if proximity itself had become dangerous. Someone's chair scraped concrete. The ack hum seemed to grow louder, filling the space where human sound had been. Commander? Holt's voice cracked on the second syllable. The crack was small. Everyone heard it. Her badge said technical analyst. Her file said Her file is classified above your clearance level, Captain. General Cole spoke for the first time. His voice was calm. Measured. The kind of calm that doesn't need volume, because the words themselves carry weight that volume could not improve. Above mine, for that matter. Commander Marchetti's operational record is maintained by exactly 4 people in the United States government: the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Director of National Intelligence, and the President. You are not among them. The briefcase opened. Admiral Chen removed a personnel file, the real one, and connected a secure tablet to the briefing room's primary display. The classification header appeared on the wall-mounted screen, glowing red. Classified red. Special Access Program. Congressional oversight required. Who else is watching this and thinking about how many people overlook the quiet ones? Admiral Chen read aloud. Not for Holt. For the record. For the 31 witnesses whose testimony would be taken within the hour. Commander Elise Marchetti. Naval Special Warfare Development Group. 13 years of classified field operations across 9 theaters of conflict. Highest confirmed precision engagement record in DevGru history, a record that is itself classified and will not be discussed further in this room. Lead intelligence architect for Project Meridian, which you described to your staff yesterday as a fabrication captain, and primary investigator in an ongoing counterintelligence operation targeting the unauthorized sale of classified sensor grid data from this installation's eastern perimeter to foreign intelligence services. The silence that followed had weight. Physical weight. It pressed against the walls and the ceiling and the chest of every person in the room. The hum became deafening, not because it had gotten louder, but because every other sound had stopped. A boot scuffed tile near the back wall. Someone's breathing went shallow and fast. A pen rolled off a desk and hit the floor, and the sound of it was enormous. Holt's face went the color of old paper. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His hands hung at his sides. His fingers opened and closed, grasping at authority that had already left the room. The corridor door opened. Commander Marchetti walked in. Same regulation bun, same level shoulders, same uniform, same stillness. But something had changed. Or rather, something had stopped being hidden. She moved with the precise economy of a person trained to close distance without generating sound. Every step was deliberate. Measured, the walk of someone who had crossed rooms exactly like this one in Kabul, in Mogadishu, in buildings without addresses in cities that pretended she had never been there. The kind of walk that doesn't announce. It arrives. Her sleeve was rolled to the elbow. The tattoo on her inner forearm was fully visible for the first time. An eagle gripping a trident and flintlock pistol, crossed with a designation number that was not assigned to units, but to individual operators whose identities were classified at the highest level of national security. Below the insignia, in block letters small enough to require proximity to read, DevGru, classified personnel, authorization code Victor 7. Master Chief Briggs saw it from the back wall. His hand. The hand that had held steady through 3 combat deployments, through firefights in rooms smaller than this one, through moments when trembling meant dying. Trembled. Once, then, he straightened to his full height. 62 years old. 34 years of service. He had earned the right to recognize what he was looking at. He had earned the right to choose what he did next. He raised his hand to his brow. A salute. Slow, precise, the angle of his wrist was textbook, not approximately correct, exactly correct, the way it was drilled at Great Lakes in Coronado until the motion lived in the bones and didn't need the brain's permission. This was not a commanded salute. This was a chosen one, and that made it heavier than anything a general could order. Admiral Chen followed. Her salute was crisp, formal, immediate. 2 stars acknowledging someone whose authority transcended rank structure. General Cole, the Pentagon liaison, the 2 federal agents, one by one. The sound of hands rising, sleeves brushing against uniform fabric, filled the room like a quiet tide. 31 people in the briefing room. Every single one of them came to attention. Every single one of them saluted. Intelligence analysts who hadn't saluted anyone in months. A maintenance technician with grease on his hands. A communications officer whose arm shook because she understood what she was looking at. Every person in that room, including the admiral who outranked everyone on this base and the general whose authority extended across the entire Special Operations Command, answered to her. Captain Holtz stood at the center of a room that had been his 12 hours ago. His arms hung at his sides like things that no longer belonged to him. His face cycled through surprise, denial, and something that looked like genuine fear. The kind that comes not from physical danger, but from the sudden understanding that every assumption you have ever made about your own importance was built on nothing. He went quiet. Not theatrical. Quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when a man runs out of performance. General Cole looked at him. The kind of look that doesn't need words but delivers a sentence. Holtz's hand came up. Shaking, his fingers barely reached his brow. The worst salute of his 22-year career. And the last one that would matter. Captain Raymond Holt. Admiral Chen's voice was quiet, clinical. The voice of institutional consequence, arriving without drama or ceremony. You are hereby relieved of command of this installation, effective immediately. You will face formal charges under Article 92, failure to obey a lawful order, and Article 134, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. Additionally, Commander Marchetti's investigation has identified unauthorized access patterns in Eastern Perimeter sensor data consistent with your personal terminal credentials and your private communications with an unidentified external contact. INSIS will take custody of your records, your devices, and your communications history within the hour. Holt's legs didn't buckle. That would have been dramatic. Instead, something worse happened. He simply stopped. Like a clock that runs out of spring, the kind of stillness that comes when a man realizes the architecture of his entire career has been hollow, and every person in this room can see through it now. 2 federal agents flanked him. No handcuffs. Not yet. Just the quiet geometry of an escort that didn't need to explain where they were going. He passed within 4 feet of her on his way to the door. She did not look at him. She was already thinking about the next phase. Commander Marchetti stood at the workstation that had been her cover for 72 hours. The same terminal. The same chair. The same keyboard her fingers had moved across, with the muscle memory of someone trained in places that didn't exist on any map, and never would. She controlled her breathing one final time. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out, hold 4. Not because she needed to, because the rhythm was hers and she was keeping it. Master Chief Briggs approached from the back wall. He stopped at 3 paces. Regulation distance. The distance between ranks, between generations, between 2 people who had both carried weight in silence and recognized the shape of it in each other. I knew, he said. His voice was quiet. The quietest sound in the room. Not what, not who exactly. But I knew something about you wasn't what it appeared. She looked at him. For the first time in 3 days, something behind her expression shifted. Not a smile, not quite, but an acknowledgement that didn't need words and used them anyway, because sometimes words are the gift you give to someone who earned them. "I know you did, Master Chief." He nodded. Once, then he turned and walked down the corridor, his boot steps fading with the measured rhythm of a man who had seen enough to know when a story was finished and when it wasn't. They said she was lying about her rank. They forgot that her rank was the one thing in that building that had never been a lie. The Hawaiian sunset painted the sky in shades of burnt copper and deep violet through the window of the quarters she no longer needed. Her watch read 1847. The base was quiet, not the quiet of a normal evening. The particular quiet that follows an earthquake, when everything is still settling and nobody is entirely sure what is safe to touch. Her laptop was open on the metal desk. The investigation file glowed against the dimming room. Holt's terminal access logs, his encrypted communications with an external contact routed through 3 commercial VPN services and a server node in Bahrain. Patterns that had taken her unit 7 months to trace and 72 hours on this base to confirm. She had 7 names on her list when the operation began. Holt was the 6th. The 7th was still unidentified. A digital ghost operating through a server in Bahrain, connected to the same Eastern Perimeter sensor data breach, referenced in Holt's encrypted messages by a 2-word designation only: Pale Horse. A surveillance intercept from 3 weeks ago had placed Pale Horse's signal within 2 kilometers of a rooftop in coastal Syria. Someone had been there. Someone had been watching. Someone was still out there. Justice isn't loud, it's patient. And patience was the one weapon they never thought to confiscate. She closed the laptop. The screen went dark. The room filled with the sound of the ocean, somewhere beyond the perimeter, waves breaking against volcanic rock with the kind of regularity that made everything human feel temporary. Tomorrow brings new ghosts to hunt. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to MVP Stories for more.